Hello again. Well, we're into week 2 in our July mini-semester. Mini-mester, is that a word? Our study of evolution in America. So here are some thoughts prompted by the class's reaction so far to Edward Larson's Summer for the Gods and Matthew Chapman's Trials of the Monkey. I'm a bit surprised, frankly, at the vehemence of some students' negative response to Chapman. His book is 20 plus years old now. 98 was the date of publication, which in 2020 definitely dates it in some respects, especially when it comes to those sensitivities in reference to which we talk lately of being woke. I really don't think anything I've read in his pages marks him as an inveterate racist. And if he was sexist, it was a form of sexism not at all uncommon among men in the last century, late in the last century. That's no excuse, of course, ultimately, but it's still useful to remind ourselves that attitudes many of us now recoil from were widely and uncircumspectly shared not so long ago. I don't mean to let him off the hook. I just don't think we ought to leave him hanging there out to dry as though he were the only one ever, for instance, to call attention to morbidly obese Greyhound bus passengers. May we just note his serial insensitivities class and turn our attention in a different, maybe more constructive direction. My hope is that we can release our author from the amateur psychoanalyst's couch, stop speculating about his possible childhood traumas beyond those he himself reveals. It is, after all, a revelatory memoir, and concede that while his confessions do sometimes place him in an unflattering light, they also show him to possess a degree of self-effacing humility and self-critique that I, for one, find honest and even refreshing. As one of us has commented, Chapman has not offended me in the way he has some others in the class. He is disrespectful, irreverent, and brutally honest, but I also find him self-effacing, most often kind to others, at least to their face, and certainly a passionate observer to the people and places he encounters, not to mention having a very humorous turn of phrase. My thoughts keep going back to the fact that he is a Hollywood screenwriter and is, in this role, has learned what arouses an audience, what placates an audience, and what entertains an audience. I think he has his well-developed writing tools on full display in this book. There are times when I wonder what the people he encountered and profiled in the book thought, if they ever read it, and if he's still welcome in Dayton. But I enjoy his writing, crassness, foibles, and all. He certainly makes no secret to who he is, what he is, and the elements of his psychological makeup. Quite so, Mitch. In any event, what I'd like to urge is that we view ourselves not as Chapman's character judges and jury, but simply as fellow visitors, virtually this semester, alas, in this time of COVID, to a small Tennessee town with a big history of aggressive resistance to Chapman's famous ancestors' evolutionary hypothesis. Let's peer over his shoulder as he encounters people very different from himself, culturally, linguistically, ideologically, etc., and eavesdrop on his conversations. Let's see if he and they can make any headway in understanding where each other are coming from. Not to spoil the story, but I've already indicated that I do find Chapman's willingness to reach across those chasms of difference and his progress in coming to understand and even respect his new friends, all while maintaining a different point of view, quite rare by comparison to the way people in our day typically regard those of a different party, different faith, culture, etc., etc. So to sum up, to me, the point of reading Chapman is not to analyze, and it's definitely not to obsess over his personal character flaws. The point is to see how very strange American anti-evolutionism can look from a British pro-evolutionist perspective. and then to see if that gap can be narrowed, if mutual respect can emerge from civil conversation and awakened curiosity about the circumstances, values, aspirations, and so forth that created the gap in the first place. And we also and simultaneously want to be reading Larson's historical account of the events in Dayton in 1925 with at least as much active engagement. It's a fascinating tale, and it really happened in our Tennessee backyard. Now, about that title, on first looking into Chapman's Dayton, if you took an English course or two, excuse me, or just have read some poetry, you probably picked it up. On first looking into Chapman's Homer was by John Keats, famous poem, a sonnet written in the early 19th century, 1816, when Keats was still just 20 years old. Essentially, it's a poem about poetry itself, describing a reading experience so profound that an entire world seems to come to life. It would be nice if Matthew Chapman's Dayton would come to life for us in the course of his conversations, and we could get off the fixation on his quirks and foibles and flaws. But anyway, that's what that title's about, and just a little humor, very little. But let's continue to have fun with this, and I do encourage you guys to put up your own author posts, to respond to each other's author posts, and let's keep the ball rolling and have a lot of fun. I look forward to Zooming with you Wednesday at 8 o'clock. See you then.